The Galactic Empire thought Earth was just another weak world, another blue sphere floating quietly on the edge of the galaxy. For years, they kept their distance, sending probes and spies, watching from the shadows. Humanity knew it. Every quiet scan, every distant ping, every false star in the night sky, it had all been recorded. And humanity waited. The warning had been given long ago, not with noise, not with threats, but with a single message carved into the black of space: stay away from Earth. That night, the Empire ignored it. Their fleets slipped across the border of Terran space, silent and cold, like wolves stepping into a sleeping camp. But what they didn't know was that Earth had not been sleeping at all. Far above the planet's atmosphere, Terran defense satellites blinked to life one by one. Tiny red indicators lit up across secure networks buried deep under the crust of the Earth. The signal reached the hidden orbital defense station hanging in the shadow of the moon. Captain Reeves stood on the command deck, his hands behind his back, staring at the massive wall of data flooding the transparent displays. Imperial warships were sliding across the edges of the system like black blades. Reeves didn't speak. He didn't have to. The quiet hum of the station grew louder as old systems woke up, as steel began to remember its purpose. Around him, his crew watched the numbers climb: enemy tonnage, vector speed, ship count. The Empire hadn't sent scouts. They had sent an invasion fleet. Down on Earth, no alarms screamed, no public broadcasts warned the civilians. Humanity had decided long ago that when this day came, it would not begin with panic. It would begin with silence. Beneath cities and oceans, bunkers and control rooms were already alive with activity. Deep under the surface, Terran Defense Council members stood in front of glowing screens, their faces hard. A single code blinked across the monitors: Protocol Iron, active. That was the signal. All preparations now moved from theory to reality. In orbit, Reeves stepped closer to the main viewport. The enemy fleet appeared as thin shadows at first, then as a river of firelight as their engines burned into the system. Their formation was tight, confident, predatory. They believed Earth to be soft, unprepared, alone. Reeves exhaled slowly. They crossed the line, he said quietly, almost like he was speaking to the stars. His crew didn't need orders yet. Everyone had trained for this moment since the warning was sent decades ago. Behind him, tactical officers locked in encrypted channels, firing off silent bursts of data to Terran command ships hiding in the dark. One of the lieutenants whispered, "They're not even cloaking their approach. They think we won't resist." Reeves' jaw tightened. They are wrong. The Imperial fleet's lead ship sent the first transmission. The voice of their admiral filled the secure channel like poison wrapped in silk. "Humans of Earth, you will surrender your world. There will be no second warning. Your resistance will mean your extinction." The voice carried centuries of arrogance, the confidence of an empire that had crushed 100 other species before humanity. But Reeves didn't answer. The line went dead. Silence answered arrogance. In the cold black beyond the moon, Terran stealth platforms opened their eyes. For years, the Empire believed humans were still trapped on their own world, barely scratching the stars. They never saw the hidden fleets parked just outside detection range. They didn't know about the dark ships with hulls built to disappear against the night. They didn't know the moon itself was watching. Reeves turned to his communications officer. "Signal the wolves," he said. The officer's hands moved fast across the console. Invisible transmissions shot out through encrypted frequencies. Across the system, Terran warships that had slept in silence for decades began to move. The enemy admiral smirked aboard his flagship. His ships glided toward Earth in elegant lines. They saw nothing. They heard nothing. They believed the planet beneath them was helpless. But hidden deep in the Kuiper line, beyond the orbit of Pluto, massive Terran dreadnoughts powered up their cores. Engines lit the darkness in faint blue sparks. Sensors on the Imperial fleet began to glitch. Static filled their long-range channels. At first, they thought it was interference. Then one of their cruisers went dark for 6 seconds. When it came back, its sensors had been jammed completely. The Empire didn't know it yet, but they had just stepped into a carefully built trap. Inside the orbital station, Reeves walked slowly to the war table, his boots echoing on the steel floor. The display showed Terran strike groups moving into flanking positions, black triangles sliding silently toward the edges of the Imperial fleet. He tapped a control and the map shifted to a close-up. Every Imperial ship was now inside the Terran kill box. Reeves spoke softly. This is the moment they meet the real Earth. The Empire had always viewed humanity as weak, because they had never heard their engines in the dark. They had never seen how fast Terran fleets could appear out of nowhere. For years, humanity hid its true strength behind quiet exploration and silence. It was never because they were afraid. It was because they were waiting. The crew around Reeves moved like clockwork. There was no shouting, no panic. Everyone knew their place, their role in the storm that was about to begin. In the lower decks of the station, launch bays opened, revealing the first wave of Terran interceptors. They sat like black knives in the shadows, waiting for the order to strike. The Empire's first mistake was believing they were alone out here. Their second mistake was crossing into Terran space. The Imperial Admiral on the flagship leaned forward, confused. "Why isn't anyone responding?" he muttered to his second-in-command. He stared at the blank Terran channels. In every war before this, the other side begged, cried, or surrendered. Earth was silent. No signal. No message. No fear. Just a wall of static. And deep inside his chest, something colder than confidence began to stir. A small, quiet pulse of doubt. Reeves raised his hand slowly. "Initiate blackout," he ordered. Across the system, every Terran satellite cut the enemy's ability to scan. The Empire's fleet suddenly lost contact with half their sensors. Their maps went dark. They fired scanning beams into the void but got nothing back. One Imperial ship turned slightly, breaking formation for just a second. Reeves smiled faintly. "There it is," he whispered. "The crack." On Earth, deep under a mountain base, the Terran Defense Council watched the feeds in silence. Old men and women, the architects of the warning, leaned forward as the fleet formations overlapped on the screens. One of them whispered, "It's time." Reeves lowered his hand. The first Terran warship uncloaked behind the moon, its dark hull sliding into the light like a beast stepping out of the shadows. Then another. Then 10. Then dozens. The Imperial fleet scanners screamed warnings too late. A ring of Terran steel now surrounded them. The Admiral's smug smile vanished. Reeves leaned forward toward the comm system, but he didn't speak to the enemy. He spoke to his crew. They crossed the line. "We don't give warnings twice." The bridge fell silent as the crew stared at their captain. Every one of them knew what that meant. Humanity had spent decades building this moment. Not for power. Not for conquest. For defense. For survival. Reeves turned his gaze back to the stars and whispered to himself, "Let them regret it." Above Earth, two forces now faced each other. One believed itself invincible. The other had nothing left to prove. The sky was still quiet, but the silence was about to shatter. Every railgun, every missile tube, every hidden turret across the system was already aimed. And for the first time in 1,000 years of conquest, the Galactic Empire was about to learn what it meant to challenge Earth. The last warning had been given long ago. This time, humanity wouldn't speak at all. They would answer with fire. The Imperial fleet drifted deeper into Terran space, their engines burning with quiet arrogance, their formation tight and perfect. They had crossed into other systems before, conquering worlds, breaking civilizations, leaving nothing but submission behind. They thought Earth would be no different. On their flagship, the Imperial Admiral stood tall, hands clasped behind his back, his cold eyes watching the blue planet through the massive viewport. "Pathetic little world," he muttered. "They think hiding in the shadows will save them." His second-in-command, a lean alien with silver skin and narrow eyes, nodded slowly. "They haven't answered the broadcast. Their silence means fear." The Admiral smiled. "Then they will kneel. All of them do." But the silence they mistook for fear was something else entirely. Deep beneath Earth's surface, enormous bunkers filled with command staff were not panicking. They were watching. A wall of screens displayed every Imperial ship, every vector, every weapon signature. Hundreds of Terran officers sat in silence, their fingers moving over consoles like a perfectly rehearsed orchestra. This wasn't the panic of a weak world. This was the precision of a world that had been waiting. 4 years, Earth's defenses had stayed hidden, their fleets silent, their weapons cold. But tonight, the countdown had begun. On the orbital station, Captain Reeves watched as the tactical map updated in real time. Red dots bloomed across the outer system, enemy ships sliding closer, confident, unguarded. Reeves leaned forward slightly, voice low but steady. They still think this is theirs to control. The Imperial fleet fired a second broadcast across every Terran channel. The Admiral's voice echoed like thunder in the void. People of Earth, surrender your world and live. Resist, and we will turn your home into ash. This is your last mercy. But again, there was no answer. No trembling voice, no desperate plea, no surrender. Just silence. On their flagship, one of the alien officers shifted uneasily. Sir, they should have responded by now. All previous campaigns, the Admiral cut him off with a sharp gesture. They are primitives. They do not understand how empires speak. Soon, they will learn. Back on the orbital station, Reeves didn't even bother to acknowledge the message. He stood before the viewport, watching their fleet glide closer. Let them talk, he muttered. Talking makes them feel safe. He turned to his crew. Bring all orbital platforms to Phase 2. Wake up the sleepers. A tactical officer's hands moved fast. Across the far side of the moon, black towers began to rise slowly from the lunar surface. Massive railgun platforms emerged from their hidden silos, locking into position. On the far edges of the system, long-range Terran dreadnoughts shifted course, sliding into strike formations. The enemy still thought they were alone. They didn't realize they were walking into a kill box. Inside the Imperial flagship, their sensors began to flicker for the first time. A technician frowned at the console. Admiral, there's interference. Sector Theta 12 just went dark. Our scans are being jammed. The Admiral narrowed his eyes. Jammed? By whom? The technician swallowed. I don't know. There's nothing there on visual. Just static. The Admiral turned to the viewport, the faint reflection of Earth glowing against the black. His smile faded slightly. Increase scanning power. Strip away their tricks. But no matter how much power they poured into the scans, the void around them stayed dark. Empty. Silent. And something deep inside the Admiral's chest tightened. Back on the hidden command floor beneath the Pacific Ocean, the Terran Defense Council watched the feeds with unblinking eyes. One of the senior advisors whispered, their sensors just went blind. Another nodded. They still don't know we've got them. Reeves' voice came through the secure line, calm and firm. Phase 2 complete. We're in their shadow now. The orbital defense platforms activated quietly, power levels rising like a storm beneath the surface of calm water. No one on Earth spoke loudly. No one needed to. The plan was older than most of the men in that room. It had been built for this exact night. Above the moon, a small Imperial cruiser broke formation and scanned the dark void ahead. Its pilot frowned. Their systems showed clear space, but something didn't feel right. Sir, the pilot radioed back to the flagship. I'm picking up thermal signatures that don't match the starfield. It's faint, but it's there. Before the Admiral could answer, the cruiser's communication cut to static. Its image on the tactical map blinked twice, then vanished. No explosion. No wreckage. Just gone. The bridge of the flagship fell silent. One of the officers whispered nervously, "What just happened?" The Admiral's hands curled into fists. "We are not alone." Reeves watched that same cruiser disappear from his screen with a cold stare. He knew exactly where it went. Terran hunter-killer platforms stationed beyond the moon had been waiting for that moment. In silence, they had moved like shadows through the dark, cut the cruiser's engines with precision strikes, and pulled it out of formation without a single blast showing on Imperial sensors. Reeves turned to his lieutenant. They'll realize soon. The young officer nodded. Then we don't give them time to recover. The admiral barked orders on his bridge, his calm mask cracking slightly. Widen scanning range. Deploy recon drones. No world can hide from us. Dozens of drones shot out into space like black seeds, spreading across the void. But they were blind the moment they left. The jamming grew thicker. One by one, their signals died. The admiral slammed a fist on the console. What are they hiding out there? His officers exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't how these invasions went. By now, planets were usually screaming for mercy. Earth had not made a sound. Reeves stood at the war table, the enemy fleet glowing in red, the Terran formations glowing in blue, slowly closing the noose around the invaders. The station lights dimmed as the power rerouted to weapon systems. In the black beyond the moon, Terran warships waited with their hulls cold and their guns quiet. The Admiralty on Earth called it the Iron Veil. To the enemy, it would feel like falling into the jaws of a predator they never saw coming. Reeves leaned forward slightly, voice low enough that only his crew could hear. This is what happens when they cross the line. The Imperial flagship finally began to feel the pressure. Unseen forces were bending the battlefield, boxing them in without a single shot fired. The Admiral realized too late that the silence wasn't weakness. It was the sound of a trap closing. He stared at Earth on the viewport again. But this time, the blue world didn't look weak anymore. It looked like something ancient, quiet, and waiting. The same officer who once mocked the silence now whispered, "Sir, something's not right. They're not afraid." The Admiral clenched his teeth. He had led dozens of campaigns. He had seen rebellions crushed and worlds burned. But none of them had stared back at him like this. No world had ever answered his demands with absolute silence. He tried to shake the unease, but it stuck to him like frost. And then the alarms on the flagship rang. The Imperial sensors finally caught a shadow moving behind the moon. One shadow turned to 10. Then 20. Then an entire wall of dark ships revealed themselves. Humanity wasn't defending with desperation. They were defending with precision. And the Empire was starting to realize the hunter was not them. Reeves looked at the tactical display, a faint, cold smile on his lips. Showtime. The blackness of space was no longer empty. Shadows moved behind the moon like wolves circling their prey. The Terran fleet revealed itself not with noise, not with flashing lights, but with silence sharper than a blade. One by one, the dark shapes slid out of their hiding places, stealth frigates, battle cruisers, and the towering silhouettes of orbital dreadnoughts built in secret shipyards far from the Empire's eyes. The Imperial fleet scanners screamed too late. Their neat, arrogant formation began to stutter. Pilots whispered in confusion. Officers yelled over static. The Imperial Admiral stepped forward, his calm mask cracking as the first Terran ships appeared on the main viewport. Dozens of massive warships with black armor and cold, blue thrusters emerged from behind the moon, surrounding the invaders like a wall of steel. For the first time in decades, the Empire found itself surrounded. On the orbital station, Captain Reeves stood at the command deck, his hands on the rail, eyes locked on the unfolding trap. His crew worked in silence, their faces hard. "Fleet is in position," a tactical officer reported. "They don't know how deep we go. They think this is all we have." Reeves gave a sharp nod. "Good. Let them believe it. Fear works best when they think they're still in control." On the enemy flagship, alarms blared as sensors flickered in and out, unable to lock onto the exact number of Terran ships. The jamming fields were eating through their systems like rot. The Admiral's second-in-command leaned in. "Sir, they were here all along. We've been walking through a net." The Admiral's jaw clenched. "Then we tear it apart." But the net was already tightening. In the outer rings of the system, more Terran ships dropped out of cloak, locking into a wide encirclement formation. The Empire's perfect wedge formation, an attack shape they had used to crush dozens of worlds, was now boxed in from every side. Their fleet had the numbers, but they no longer controlled the space. And control had always been their advantage. Reeves watched their formation flicker on his tactical map. Look at them, he said softly. All that power, and they still don't know they're trapped. The Imperial Admiral barked orders, trying to regain the initiative. Fighters deployed from the hangars of the flagship in waves, swarming forward like angry hornets. They moved fast, expecting a counterattack. But the Terran fleet didn't fire. Not yet. The fighters swept across empty space and met. Nothing. Their scanners picked up false readings, ghost signatures, entire fleets that weren't there. They're scrambling our targeting. One Imperial pilot shouted over the comm, I can't get a clean lock. Reeves watched their chaos unfold with cold precision. This was how humanity fought, not like an empire that flexed muscle, but like hunters that knew how to corner something far bigger than themselves. On the Imperial bridge, tension rose like smoke. One of the junior officers spoke nervously, Admiral, they've surrounded us. If we don't act fast, we'll be boxed in completely. The Admiral turned sharply, fury rising. Then act. We will burn a hole through their wall. He raised his voice over the chaos. Form spearhead formation. Focus fire on the nearest Terran cluster. The Imperial ships began to move, but even their formation was slower now. Their sensors were unreliable, their navigational feeds distorted. What they didn't know was that Terran fleets had been studying them for years. Every weakness, every pattern, every habit. Humanity didn't build this trap overnight. It had been waiting for this exact moment. Reeves raised his hand slowly. The war table in front of him lit up as targeting solutions locked onto every Imperial ship. We have them where we want them, whispered his weapons officer. Reeves lowered his hand slightly. Hold, he ordered. His voice cut through the tension like steel. Let them come closer. Make them think they can break through. The Terran fleet held their fire, engines burning low, their black hulls blending into the starfield like shadows waiting to strike. The Empire moved forward, convinced they still had power. That belief was their last mistake. Then it happened. An Imperial scout ship drifted too close to the far side of the moon, scanning for weak points. Its sensors picked up a sudden spike of energy, just a flicker, and then the entire ship vanished in a flash of light. No warning, no visible shot. 1 second it was there. The next, it was scrap floating in silence. The Admiral froze. What was that? He barked. Where did that shot come from? His officers scrambled over their consoles. No heat signature. No railgun trail. It was like the void itself bit them in half. The Admiral's eyes widened slightly. That was not the reaction of a predator. That was the first heartbeat of fear. Reeves turned away from the war table to face the massive viewport on the station. They are starting to understand, he said quietly. But it's already too late. He raised his voice just enough for his officers to hear. Mark their lead ships. Leave the rear ones for later. When the signal drops, we cut the head off the snake first. A quiet chorus of aye, Captain followed. No one on the Terran side shouted. No one panicked. They didn't need to. This was their battlefield. The Admiral on the Imperial ship tried to push down the unease rising in his chest. They are just humans, he muttered under his breath. They can't outfight the Empire. But the truth was burning itself into every Imperial sensor, every flickering readout. Terran technology wasn't loud or bright. It was quiet, deliberate, and built to kill without mercy. As the Imperial fleet tried to push through, their formation tightened into a spear, but that's exactly what Reeves had been waiting for. He wanted them close. He wanted them to believe they had a chance. Then he'd close the jaws. A low rumble shook the Terran station as thousands of weapon systems aligned across orbit and beyond. Massive stealth dreadnoughts angled their railguns toward the heart of the Imperial spear. Orbital cannons, hidden in the dark for decades, hummed with growing energy. Terran missile silos deep underground opened, silent and cold, waiting for the order. Every piece of this trap had been designed to strike at the perfect second. Reeves whispered under his breath, "You crossed the line, and now you'll learn why we warned you." The Imperial Admiral stared at the tactical display on his screen. The spearhead was moving forward, but their sensors showed movement on all sides, too much movement. One of his officers shouted, multiple contacts closing in fast. They are surrounding us completely. Another added, Sir, we've never seen formation data like this. It's like they're inside our system already. The Admiral gritted his teeth. Brace for engagement. But in his voice, there was a trace of something new. Not command. Not confidence. Doubt. Reeves lifted his hand over the command console. For a moment, the entire station went still. Even the stars seemed to hold their breath. Signal all Terran units, Reeves said slowly. On my mark, strike. His finger hovered for a heartbeat. The Imperial fleet pushed deeper, blind to the fact that they were already surrounded by 1,000 guns they couldn't see. And then, with a quiet motion, Reeves brought his hand down. In the dark of space, the Terran fleet disappeared from passive stance and bared its teeth. The silence of Earth ended, not with a warning, not with a message, but with fire. The order had barely left Reeves's lips before the black sky around Earth ignited like a storm of silent fire. Terran dreadnoughts roared to life in perfect unison, their engines flaring a cold blue, their railguns opening with the thunder of war. Thousands of tungsten slugs screamed across the void, ripping through the darkness faster than light could catch them. The first Imperial cruiser didn't even have time to raise its shields before a railgun round punched through its hull and split it in half like a rotten fruit. One moment, it was part of their proud formation. The next, it was nothing but floating wreckage. The Imperial spearhead formation staggered immediately. Reeves stood at the center of the orbital station's command deck, his voice calm while the stars burned outside. Target their command channels. Cut their throat first. Across the Imperial flagship, chaos spread like fire through dry grass. Officers screamed over each other, their perfect machine of war suddenly cracking under pressure it had never felt before. The Admiral slammed a fist on the console, roaring at his bridge crew. Raise shields. Return fire. I want their lead ships turned to ash. But their sensors were still half-blind, their targeting scrambled by Terran jammers. Terran ships didn't need to see them clearly. They already had every Imperial vessel mapped out weeks ago. This wasn't a battle they were improvising. It was one they had built for years. On the edges of the system, Terran missile silos opened like sleeping beasts waking from a long slumber. Hundreds of hypersonic warheads screamed up through the clouds, their vapor trails burning against the dark. They left Earth's atmosphere in seconds and vanished from enemy scanners, weaving through jamming corridors only Terran systems understood. When they reappeared, they weren't blips on radar. They were death. The missiles slammed into Imperial destroyers, tearing through their armor with surgical precision. Explosions rippled through their formation, a chain reaction of fire and silence. On the bridge of the flagship, the Admiral watched as one of his best carriers vanished in a single blinding flash. The sound of his crew shouting blurred into static. For the first time in his long career, he didn't feel like a conqueror. He felt like prey. Where are they hitting us from? He barked. Everywhere, someone screamed back. They are cloaked. They are everywhere. Reeves gave his next command without raising his voice. Interceptor squadrons, cut their flanks. From the shadow of the moon, sleek Terran fighter craft burst forward like a swarm of black knives. Their formation was silent, perfect, merciless. The Imperial fleet released its own fighter squadrons, thousands of shimmering crafts spreading like a wave of hornets. But the Empire had spent years fighting slow, desperate enemies who ran. Humanity didn't run. They cut. The first dogfights exploded between the stars, brilliant streaks of blue and red flashing across the black. Terran pilots moved like ghosts, striking hard, vanishing before the enemy could turn. Imperial fighters fell by the hundreds, spinning into fire before they could even lock their weapons. On the Imperial bridge, the Admiral shouted orders to rally, but every time they tried to reform their line, another Terran strike shattered it. Railgun fire tore through their vanguard, missile storms ripped into their flanks, and fighter squadrons slipped through the gaps like blades through soft cloth. The perfect Imperial formation that had crushed 100 worlds was unraveling in minutes. Reeves watched the tactical display light up with the enemy's losses. His eyes didn't move, didn't soften. They came to our home, he said quietly. Now they'll learn why that was their last mistake. The Empire tried to answer with fire of its own. Their heavy cannons flared red and gold, hurling blasts toward the Terran fleet. But their shots were wild, scattered by the jamming fields and false signatures. The few that found their target slammed against Terran shields, but the humans had built their defenses to take a beating. Reeves's crew worked like a single machine, adjusting formations, shifting shields, redirecting fire. Not a single command was wasted. Not a single movement was unplanned. The Imperial Admiral leaned over the console, teeth clenched. "This is Earth," he hissed, almost to himself. "They are just humans." But he could no longer ignore what his senses told him. His fleet, the fleet that should have broken their world in an hour, was being torn apart like paper in a storm. The message that Earth had sent years ago, one warning, no second chances, was no bluff. One of the Imperial destroyers tried to break away from the kill box, engines flaring to full. Reeves's weapons officer caught it immediately. Target acquired. Reeves didn't hesitate. Delete it. A single railgun round from a Terran dreadnought punched through the destroyer's reactor core. The ship vanished in a flash of blue fire, leaving only drifting metal and silence. Reeves turned his eyes toward the center of the map, the Imperial flagship. Time to cut the head. The Terran fleet shifted formation like a pack of wolves closing in for the final bite. Every gun on every ship aligned toward the flagship. Railguns charged. Missiles locked. Interceptors fell back in a tight arc to clear the kill zone. The Admiral on the Imperial bridge stared at the growing wave of targeting markers on his screen, his pulse thundering in his ears. His second-in-command whispered, "They planned this, from the start." The Admiral's voice cracked with rage. "Then they'll burn with us." He ordered every ship to fire everything they had at the Terran fleet. Beams, cannons, torpedoes. The void exploded with light and fury. For a moment, the stars were drowned in fire. But the Terran fleet had expected it. Their shields took the storm. Some ships shook, some were hit hard, but none broke. And when the fire ended, Earth's fleet was still there. Silent, waiting, aimed. Reeves lowered his hand. Now! Thousands of guns answered as one. A wall of railgun slugs and hypersonic missiles slammed into the flagship. Its shields burned bright, then failed with a crack like glass. Armor shattered, decks tore open, flames roared into the black. The Admiral fell against his console as the bridge shook around him, his crew screaming. He stared at the display in disbelief. This was supposed to be easy. Earth was supposed to fall. Reeves watched as the enemy flagship's shield indicator collapsed. A single dreadnought in the Terran fleet moved forward, the Eisenhower, its main railgun glowing white-hot. "End it," Reeves said softly. The shot cut through space like a spear. The flagship cracked in two. The Imperial Admiral had no time to react as the ship around him split open, flames flooding into the void. The bridge of the orbital station was dead silent. No cheering. No victory cries. They didn't celebrate defending their home. They only did what they had promised to do if anyone ever crossed the line. Reeves exhaled slowly, his voice steady. "Target the next group. This isn't over yet." Outside, the Empire's proud fleet was burning. The warning had been ignored. Now they were learning why that was the biggest mistake in their history. The Imperial fleet was breaking, but the battle wasn't over. The stars around Earth burned red and white from the endless explosions. Twisted metal drifted like black snow, and the void carried the silent glow of dying ships. The Imperial Admiral's fleet, once perfect and untouchable, was now scattered like glass crushed beneath a hammer. Dozens of their destroyers floated powerless, their engines dead, their formations shattered. But they were still dangerous. Cornered predators always are. On the orbital station, Captain Reeves leaned forward over the tactical display, his face hard, his eyes fixed. "They'll try one last push," he said quietly. "They won't leave without spilling blood." His second officer nodded, breath heavy. "Then we spill theirs first." The Empire wasn't used to this. They were the ones who crushed resistance, not the ones who crawled through fire to survive. Across their fleet, Panic crackled through comm channels. Officers screamed for formation. Pilots demanded targets. Engineers fought to keep shields alive. A cluster of battleships pulled together near the center of the ruined formation, trying to rebuild their command structure. It was a desperate move, but Reeves saw it immediately. "There," he said, pointing at the glowing mass of red on the map. "That's their fallback point. They'll rally there. They'll throw everything they have left in one shot." Down on Earth, deep in the hidden command bunkers, the Terran Defense Council watched the feed in silence. The war outside wasn't just a battle. It was a message. Across the galaxy, Imperial signals were being intercepted and broadcast to every major listening post. The Empire had walked into Earth's warning and was being destroyed in front of every eye in the stars. Reeves didn't have to say it. Humanity wasn't just defending Earth anymore. It was showing the galaxy why that single warning meant something. "Stay away." The Imperial Admiral, blood running down his forehead from the impact when the flagship was hit, stood on the shattered bridge of his backup command ship. Flames licked the corners of the walls, his crew yelling for control. He slammed his fist against the console. "Pull every ship we have into line," he barked. "We will tear a hole through their defenses and burn their world to the ground." His second-in-command hesitated. "Admiral, we've lost more than half the fleet. Our scanners—" "I don't care," the Admiral roared. "If we die taking something with us." It was the voice of a predator forced into a corner. Reeves saw the Imperial remnants moving, their formation tightening, their engines burning hot. "They're going to charge," Harper whispered. Reeves gave a slow nod. "And we'll let them come. Then we'll close the jaws." The Terran fleet adjusted position with quiet, deadly precision. Dreadnoughts shifted, stealth cruisers moved into arcs that the enemy couldn't see, and Earth's defense grid pulsed to life with cold, silent power. The humans didn't move like prey. They moved like hunters who had waited for the prey to run right into the trap. The Imperial charge came like a black spear. What was left of their fleet ignited its engines, pushing straight toward Earth. Their cannons burned red, their fighters poured out in swarms, and the Admiral screamed into the comms, "Forward." It was their final, desperate gamble. All their remaining energy poured into one suicidal strike to break through the human wall. But Reeves had spent years planning for this moment. The moment an enemy thought brute force could win against a mind built on patience. "Hold fire," Reeves ordered. The bridge fell silent. Even the alarms seemed quieter. On the screens, the Imperial fleet grew larger, closer, their lines sharpening like blades. "Captain," Harper said through clenched teeth, "they'll be in range in 20 seconds. Reeves didn't blink. "Let them come." 15 seconds. The Imperial guns burned brighter. 10 seconds. Their fighters rushed ahead, ready to crash into the Terran fleet. 5 seconds. "Fire," Reeves said softly. The void exploded. Every Terran railgun, every missile bay, every orbital cannon unleashed at once. The darkness turned into a storm of blue and silver fire. Missiles cut through the charging formation like claws through flesh, slamming into engines and tearing through command decks. Railgun rounds shattered armor, splitting ships in half before their weapons could even fire. Imperial fighters disintegrated mid-flight, caught in clouds of flak and energy bursts. Their charge collapsed almost instantly, their proud line dissolving into wreckage before it even reached the halfway mark. But some ships kept coming. A handful of Imperial battleships, engines screaming, pushed through the storm with shields burning red. Reeves narrowed his eyes. "Those are their fanatics," he muttered. "Bring them down." Terran dreadnoughts adjusted their aim, and concentrated volleys ripped into the advancing warships. One battleship exploded so violently that the shockwave tore apart two more. Another was gutted from bow to stern by a direct railgun hit, its core venting into space. Only one remained, limping forward, its hull on fire, but its guns still burning. Reeves stared at it like a hunter watching a wounded beast. "That's the Admiral," he said flatly. "End him." The Terran fleet didn't hesitate. Coordinated fire from 5 warships slammed into the Admiral's last vessel. Its shields cracked. Its engines failed. The Imperial Command ship lurched forward, drifting toward Earth like a dead thing refusing to fall. On its bridge, the Admiral staggered to his knees, blood dripping from his mouth. He stared at Earth's image through the cracked viewport. The world below was quiet. No burning cities. No panic. Just a silent, defiant world staring back at him. In that moment, he understood what the warning really meant. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Reeves gave the final command. All batteries. Finish it. The sky lit up one last time. Railgun fire pierced through the Admiral's ship, cutting it apart piece by piece until it cracked like glass. Flames burst out into the vacuum. The once proud Imperial flagship disintegrated into glowing debris and silence. No speech. No surrender. Just the end. On the Terran command deck, no one cheered. The crew sat at their stations, eyes fixed on the field of wreckage that now hung over Earth like a graveyard. Reeves straightened slowly, his voice quiet but firm. Secure the perimeter. Make sure no one gets out alive. Not one ship. Across the Terran fleet, the hunters moved through the field, picking off crippled ships, silencing escape pods, crushing the last breath of the invaders. The Empire had crossed the line. Humanity had made sure they'd never forget it. Across the galaxy, Imperial signals went silent. Other civilizations watching the broadcast saw the impossible. A single human system had crushed one of the strongest fleets in the galaxy. The world they had all mocked, ignored, underestimated, had shattered an empire's pride. Earth had spoken once. And that one warning had been enough. The Empire's fleet was in pieces, their broken warships drifting in the cold Black Sea like dead giants. What once entered Terran space as a wall of power was now nothing more than wreckage and desperate signals. The last few Imperial ships burned their engines red hot, pushing to regroup around the wreckage of their flagship's escorts. Their formations were ruined, but their pride hadn't died yet. A cornered beast always bites hardest before it falls. On the orbital command station, Captain Reeves stood still at the front of the bridge, staring at the tactical map as the last clusters of red marks tried to move together. His voice was calm, controlled, and sharp. They're going to make one last move. They'd rather die than crawl back and face their Emperor empty-handed. Harper stepped closer, reading the feed. They've lost their flagship, their destroyers are crippled, and they're still trying to push. They're not retreating. Reeves gave a slow nod. Of course not. They're an empire. And this is what happens when someone tells an empire no. Far below them, the surface of Earth remained quiet. The people didn't even know the scale of what was happening above their heads. But in hidden bunkers deep under the ground, the Terran Defense Council watched the battle unfold with cold eyes. They had planned for this exact night for years. This wasn't chaos. This was calculation. Earth's defenses didn't just want to win. They wanted to make sure the entire galaxy saw what happened to those who crossed the line. Reeves watched as the enemy's last ships moved closer together. A dying wolf pack gathering for a final charge. They're lining up for a suicide run, his tactical officer said. Straight for the planet. Reeves tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing. Then we'll make sure they never even reach the atmosphere. The Imperial Admiral, standing on the cracked deck of a surviving battlecruiser, gripped the railing until his knuckles turned white. His face was streaked with blood and smoke. Around him, his officers trembled, their voices breaking as they reported more losses. Admiral, our shields are collapsing on 3 fronts. Weapons are at 30%. If we retreat now, some of us might live. The Admiral's voice came out low and venomous. Retreat? After everything? No. If Earth wants to play gods, we'll make them bleed. He turned toward the viewport, the blue planet hanging silently in the distance, daring him to come closer. He spat on the floor. All ships, prepare for a full burn. We're going to tear their world open. The last Imperial engines roared to life. Their ships surged forward in a desperate wedge formation, firing what little they had left. Missiles streaked through space, glowing red like dying stars, their cannons vomiting bursts of plasma. It was messy, reckless, furious. But it was still dangerous. Reeves watched their trajectory carefully. If even one battleship broke through the defense net, it could mean destruction on the surface. He lowered his voice. Bring the shield wall online. Prepare counterfire. No survivors. Terran dreadnoughts moved like steel titans, shifting position with perfect coordination. Orbital platforms rotated, glowing faintly as their power cores heated to maximum. Missile silos under the crust of the Earth opened one last time, like the planet itself was baring its teeth. The Terran fleet didn't charge. It didn't panic. It waited. Reeves raised his hand. Hold. Harper clenched his fists at his station. They're almost in range. Reeves's eyes didn't blink. Hold. The Imperial wedge formation came closer, weapons blazing, hoping to punch a hole through the Terran wall. But the humans had built their defenses with this exact moment in mind. Now, Reeves said softly. The void exploded again. Thousands of Terran weapons fired in a perfect wave, a solid wall of firepower slamming into the charging wedge like a hammer striking glass. The first Imperial ship took a railgun slug through its reactor and erupted in a chain reaction that consumed the ships behind it. Missile barrages shredded their flanks. Plasma beams ripped through their armor, tearing holes where nothing but arrogance had been a few hours ago. The last Imperial attack was crushed before it even reached halfway. The Imperial Admiral's battlecruiser kept pushing through the storm, its shields flickering, its engines screaming. His officers begged him to fall back, but he didn't listen. His hatred for Earth burned too brightly. We'll hit their world. I don't care if it's the last thing I do, he growled. But as his ship came into the inner defense line, a shadow rose up from the dark side of the moon. A Terran dreadnought, one of Earth's oldest and most powerful, uncloaked directly in front of him. Its railgun was already charged, glowing bright like the sun. Reeves's voice came through the comms, calm and cold. This is the end of your line. The Admiral barely had time to breathe before the railgun fired. The shot hit dead center. The Imperial cruiser cracked like dry bone, split in two, and went dark. The Admiral's last words never left his mouth. The rest of the enemy ships scattered in panic, leaderless, broken, terrified. Terran interceptors swarmed them like vultures, cutting down anything that tried to flee. Escape pods were hunted. Wrecks were finished off. Humanity left no one to carry the story back with a lie. Only the truth. Reeves stood tall at the command deck, the tactical screen now showing nothing but fading red dots. Harper exhaled, his shoulders heavy. It's over, he said softly. But Reeves didn't relax. His gaze stayed on the wreckage field drifting like ghosts over Earth. No, he said. This is the beginning. Across the galaxy, every listening post, every silent watcher, every rival power had received the signal. The empire that had once claimed they would erase Earth had been erased themselves. The silence after the storm was heavy. No celebration. No cheering. Just the steady hum of victory earned the hard way. Terran ships began clearing the battlefield methodically, dragging enemy wrecks out of orbit, scanning for survivors. Reeves gave his final command, his voice steady and absolute. No Imperial vessel leaves this system alive. Not one. Let the galaxy hear the silence they left behind. The Terran fleet moved through the graveyard it had created. Above the blue world, the night sky was theirs again. The Empire had crossed the line. Humanity had not just defended itself. It had reminded the stars that its warning was not a threat. It was a promise written in fire. And tonight, that promise had been kept. The battlefield above Earth was no longer a war zone. It was a graveyard. Wreckage from the Imperial fleet drifted in silent orbits, their shattered hulls turning slowly against the light of distant stars. Ships that had once represented the strength of a galactic empire were now nothing but burnt-out shells, their proud banners torn apart, their engines cold. Terran warships moved silently through the ruins, their black hulls reflecting the faint glow of dying flames. They didn't move with the wild joy of victory. They moved like hunters who had done what needed to be done. Captain Reeves stood at the center of the orbital station's command deck, staring at the tactical display filled with nothing but fading red blips. The enemy was gone. Their last transmission had cut off minutes ago. No distress call. No retreat order. Nothing. Just silence. Status, he said. Harper's voice came back quietly. All enemy ships neutralized. No signals. No survivors. Reeves exhaled slowly through his nose. Good. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, the Terran Defense Council sat in their hardened bunkers, watching the same silence unfold. The room smelled of tension, metal, and old air. For years, they had lived with the weight of the warning. One step into our skies, and there will be no second chance. The Empire had laughed at that warning. Now, their fleet was a cloud of ash drifting through space. One of the counselors leaned back slowly, their voice trembling with a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. We actually did it, but Reeves didn't smile. No one did. They hadn't won a glorious war. They had prevented one from ever reaching the ground. On the far edge of the system, Terran dreadnoughts began broadcasting their message. A single, unencrypted signal, sent on every galactic channel, every frequency, every corner of space where a receiver could hear. Reeves's voice echoed across the stars, calm, measured, and cold as steel. Earth gave you a warning. You crossed the line. You saw the result. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Stay away from Earth. The message was short, deliberate, and left no room for interpretation. No one in the galaxy would misunderstand it. Humanity didn't roar. It didn't beg. It simply spoke and let the fire in orbit tell the rest of the story. Far across the galaxy, in shadowed war rooms and golden halls of power, other empires listened. Leaders leaned forward, staring at the data streaming in. A full Imperial fleet gone silent, their massive dreadnoughts destroyed by what they once considered a frontier species. Whisper networks lit up. Fear spread like wildfire. Some denied it. Some trembled. But all of them understood one truth now. Earth wasn't prey. It wasn't a colony waiting to be conquered. It was something far more dangerous, a world that did not bluff. Above the planet, Terran ships began forming into tight patrol formations, sweeping through the wreckage field. Interceptors chased down drifting escape pods. Marines boarded the few damaged Imperial ships still floating, not to offer mercy, but to make sure no one left alive could carry false stories. Earth's warning had to remain pure, unshakable. Reeves watched the feed as one last Imperial cruiser, its hull torn in half, was pulled into the gravity well and burned up in the atmosphere like a dying comet. No survivors. No one to rebuild this fleet. The message would be carved into the stars through the silence they left behind. Harper walked up beside Reeves, his uniform scorched and dirty from the long battle. His voice was low. "We should celebrate, Captain. The Empire's fleet is gone. We just did the impossible." Reeves didn't take his eyes off the viewport. The stars beyond were calm again. "No," he said quietly. "We did what we had to. And they'll come again. Not the same fleet. Not the same faces. But someone will." Harper looked down, understanding. This wasn't a victory to celebrate. This was the moment the galaxy realized humanity was no longer a quiet planet on the edge of a map. The Terran fleet began pulling back to orbit, moving in formation like a silent machine. They didn't need to show off. Their victory was already written in the debris. Across the galaxy, news would travel faster than any ship. An entire Imperial battle group had been wiped out in a single night. No negotiations. No mercy. The Empire's arrogance had been turned into a warning sign for every other power. Reeves turned to his crew, his voice steady. "Record the field. Every detail. Every wreck. Let the galaxy see what happens when someone crosses that line." Down on Earth, life remained peaceful. People still walked the streets, children still played, cities still shone under the night sky. The war had never reached the ground. Reeves looked down at the planet through the viewport, the same blue and green world the enemy had sworn to burn. He whispered under his breath, "They thought they were gods. But we're not the ones who kneel." The cleanup operation stretched through the night. Terran drones pulled in the largest wrecks for study, others were quietly destroyed. Not a single piece of Imperial technology would be allowed to return to the stars. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. It was building its reputation, stone by stone, battle by battle. And this battle would be remembered for centuries. As the last piece of the Imperial fleet burned into dust, Reeves gave the final order. Broadcast the coordinates. Leave the wreckage markers. Let them see where their arrogance died. The Terran communications network spread the location across every major star lane. No one needed to decode the message. The battlefield itself was the warning. Stay away from Earth. The stars were silent again. No more alarms. No more enemy signals. The Empire had crossed the line and paid the price in blood and steel. And out there, watching, other empires whispered in fear of the species that spoke softly but carried fire. Earth had only spoken once. It didn't need to speak twice. The next one who crossed that line would find the same fate waiting for them in the black. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not with mercy, but with the cold, unforgettable weight of a single promise kept.